All right, well, I guess that's my cue. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at the Paueru Gai Dialogues, the Changing Environment and Humanities. My name is Rebecca Ho, and I'm a board member and a long-term volunteer with the Powell Street Festival Society. I am a fourth-generation Japanese Canadian and I've lived in BC all my life. I've enjoyed traveling and experiencing the unique and diverse ecosystems of our province. I'm joining you all today from the traditional lands of the T'uy't'tanat First Nations people. As I watch the Fraser River from my US apartment, I'm grateful for the stewardship of their land. The Powell Street Festival is usually held in Paueru Gai in downtown Eastside, which are on the unceded territories of Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam people. As I think of my own connections to Oppenheimer Park during the festival weekend, I can be overwhelmed by a sense of community and past happy memories. I am reminded that our relationship to our land is multifaceted, sometimes generating an emotional and human response. I hope you will join me today in acknowledging where you might be coming from in your lands, where you're joining us today in the chat. As we remember our own connections to our lands, I hope we can all have an insightful dialogue together. We come together in changing times. Our lives are disrupted by the pandemic, while climate change continues to shift our environment. Our world is diverse, and our own understandings and approach can be just as varied. Please consider your own assumptions and thoughts while we listen and participate in this dialogue. This series is possible thanks to the financial support of HAPA Collaborative, SFU David Lamb Center, Canadian Council for the Arts, BC Arts Council, City of Vancouver, individual donors, and in-kind support from the Bulletin Magazine and Element IQ. But before we get started, just some housekeeping notes. We are recording the guest presentations, and these will be available on the Powell Street YouTube channel. You can turn off your cameras if you wish to remain private. There is a Q&A right after the panelist presentation, and you can write your questions in the chat box. Also, I want to stress our priority today is to hear from everyone during our breakout groups. We are inviting you into a circle, but we have some contextual and technology constraints. So we've asked our facilitators in each group to be a bit tough on time management. We apologize in advance. Should you wish to share more, some thoughts after the event concludes, we've set up a discussion group on Facebook, which you can find on the Paueru Gai Dialogues event page. I'd like to now introduce our guest host. Her name is Haruko Okano, a Sansei generation Japanese Canadian who was born in Toronto but now lives in Vancouver, BC. She was raised by Caucasian foster parents and has lived in several different locations through the Ontario Children's Aid Society.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I am today's host for the Paueru Gai Dialogue, which is the Changing Environment and Humanity. It's true, I am a third-generation Japanese Canadian, but I've been raised by Caucasians. Vancouver is my main residence, but today I am speaking with you from Gabriola Island, the unceded traditional ancestral territory of the Sunemo people. I love this land, some call Turtle Island. That is the mother of all living beings here. I've learned that all humans are an extension of the earth, not the other way around. And I am committed to deepening that understanding in how I live, work, and enjoy the blessings of this earth. Today's guest panelists in order of presentation are T'uy't'tanat-Cease Wyss, Jen Sungshine, and Rita Wong, powerhouse people. They will talk about how little things add up to good things for ourselves and the environment. They'll show stories about houseplants, the food we eat, words we use, and lessons from Indigenous knowledge keepers to demonstrate how we can deepen our understanding of the world today and how we might contribute to a future for all beings. I would like to welcome T'uy't'tanat-Cease Wyss as our first speaker. Her work ranges over 30 years She is often referred to as a plant diva, focused on sustainability, permaculture techniques, Coast Salish cultural elements, including themes of ethnobotany, Indigenous language, revival of Indigenous language revival, Salish weaving, and digital media technology. Please lend your ears and eyes to her presentation. Welcome, Cease.
Athsquile, eich tnoyup, T'uy't'tanat-Cease Cease sna, on Wanoxton squallow and teetsites. So welcome. Today I am in my ancestral homelands in the village of Humulchitson, Ochameo. And from here you get to see me and hear me in the garden, Harmony Garden, also known as Panamai at Humulchitson, which is our wild foods food security hub here. And I'm going to share a presentation. So I'm just going to go share content, share screen, and start broadcast. Okay, and oh, there we go. Give me a second. We just did it. We know it works. And here we go. Okay, so really want to thank the hosts here, the Paueru Gai Dialogues. And so yeah, just wanted to share some information about my views on Mother Earth, or T'uy't'tanat-Cease. And so my project or my presentation is Equin T'uy't'tanat-Cease. T'uy't'tanat, remediation and restoration of both urban and rural spaces as a means of acknowledging what has been taken and how time is essential in healing the earth, helping it. What I've written here basically reads as helping Mother Earth get out of trouble. So human beings are the abusers of the Mother Earth, and we need to acknowledge the issues and the wounds. I took this photo from the internet. I was typing in scarred earth. And so I think in a lot of places around the world, we are seeing places where this to me just speaks of human intervention and killing off the indigenous plants and losing our ancestors. To indigenous people, plants and rocks are our ancestors. They are the oldest beings on the planet. So yeah, I also want to acknowledge that ancient and old growth forests are the key to this planet's survival. And the hard truths are that without air, there is no way to live here. Without food and water, we cannot live. Without shelter and a means of movement to places where there is food and materials for living, there is no home nor movement. And without forests, ancient, old growth, or newly forming green spaces, there is nothing left for anything or anyone. And to put it into context, the image you see here is my hand on an ancient yellow cedar tree in the just recently fully protected ancient forest of Stalkaya, which is also known as the Dakota Bear Sanctuary. And that announcement just came this spring about how we are on the verge of just protecting and saving this forest as well as other ones, while we're watching in the wake of places like Ferry Creek going down from corporations with the support of the goon squads, the RCMP and everybody else. And just really like people to see like what the skin of an ancient yellow cedar looks like. And, you know, my tiny hand against that, it's looking up into the sky. It takes a long time for these cedars to get that big. We've destroyed about 2/3 of the planet's natural spaces, and we continue to destroy what's left. So how do we undo the destruction that has taken place in a short time? We need to act fast. We need to start looking at things like permaculture, and we actually have to start working with the children today teaching them how to plant things and how to restore and how to grow mushrooms and how to rebuild ecosystems, because we see what we have lost. And how do we assess that damage? What can we do to start making positive changes to begin the healing that may take several generations to heal and address the concerns of making these mistakes again in the future? And I really do believe in the work and philosophies of permaculture, but not from the non-Indigenous perspective. My training all came through Indigenous women's groups and a decolonial perspective on permaculture and asserting ourselves as matriarchs in the forest. And as my people would call me, they would say that I'm a cedar woman, and a cedar woman goes into the forest and witnesses what the destruction is and how to fix it and how to help heal it. So to give you an idea, again, here's a yellow cedar on the left, and it's a 1,600-year-old cedar tree in the Dakota Bear Sanctuary, as I said, also known as Stelkaya, on the Sunshine Coast near Roberts Creek. And it takes about 2 hours to drive up there and walk in. And this is one spot where it's a bit level, but between myself and the camera, the person that took the picture, it's about a 18 degree grade. So putting a road in there would have literally destroyed the entire forest. And then examples of what it looks like to begin reparation in an area that was scarified 100 years ago. So Strathcona Park, with my colleague Anne Riley, I recently helped to start installing a cedar grove in partnership with the Wild Salmon Caravan and the Working Group on Indigenous Food Sovereignty. And as you can see in the bottom corner, my colleague, my sister, my Wet'suwet'en sister with her Wet'suwet'en / Liwat daughter are helping to plant those seedlings, the berry plants and cedars that will feed our future generations. Again, bringing you back to the Dakota Bear Sanctuary, looking up in the sky, that's what an old growth forest, that's what an ancient forest skyline looks like from the ground up. It's not perfectly aligned. There's patchy pieces of the forest that can shine through and shine a light on the tiny berries. And then in the photo at the top corner, that was actually taken at a mountaintop in Mount Currie. And we had literally seen the fresh footprints of a mother and cub bear in the mud in the clear cut we were walking through. And so we know that our ancestors, the bears, the Mekhalch and their Munmun, their little ones, are walking through these spaces. And then back down again in the bottom corner, what's amazing to me about that picture is that there's an ancient tree with magnificently large fungi, and those fungi collect water, and the bears walk by and lick the water off there to get a little drink on their way up the mountains. And at the bottom of the picture is one of the vaccinium family, blue huckleberries. And those are spread, that's what's behind there. Everywhere around this bottom of this forest is all food that provides for those bears. And it also provides for humans, but it's really, really hard to get there. But I really want to draw attention to what we're losing. We're not just losing a forest, we're losing our ancestors and we're losing ecosystems. And that's what to replicate that's thousands and thousands of years of reparation. So we have to get busy and get working on that. The children in here are children from my nation, from Squamish, and they came to work with my colleague Anne and I to release butterflies, and we encouraged them to gather flowers to bring home and press. And it was a really big thing for them during COVID. They've been lucky to be all family in a program in our community. And to come to Vancouver was a really big deal for them. And behind you can see tobacco and sunflowers and wildflowers growing on the site in an urban environment. And that's what it means to start repairing. We need to do this as communities for these little ones. Of course, a handful of earth, you know, I mean, it says it all. Like, to see dark, rich, brown earth like that, it means that it is a healthy soil. It is decolonized. To me, when you look at dirt is void of nutrients. It's gray or beige. It doesn't have color. And when you put the time and effort into to heal the earth, you're given dark earth. It is rich in moist, wet earth, bugs and worms, mycelium, all coexisting in there. And the bottom picture is one of my colleagues, part of the Indigenous Food and Freedom School up in Nisconlith. And the young warrior there, Sean Billy, took us out on the land, and the trench that he's in was dug by his ancestors over several hundreds of years. They did these trenches to bring down to their community to grow foods. So when people say that Indigenous people haven't been involved in agriculture, we've always been involved in agriculture. And that he actually understood what that trench was and brought us and shared that was a really deep and meaningful engagement on the land, and to remind us that we have that technology. If people did this with just digging sticks for, I think it was like a 20-mile trench, and they did that from the closest water source, they did that over hundreds of years. That's resilience, and that's determination, and that's vision. And we are so pitiful in this day and age that we want machinery to do this and that for us. But going back to the earth, holding that earth, remembering children, remembering what our ancestors did, that's the work we have ahead of us. And we all have it in us to do this. I have so many injuries in my body and so much trauma I've witnessed and so much I've pulled out of my family, and I still do this work, and it lifts me up, and it goes back to holding that earth, you know. And like I said, teamwork and allyship are essential. The biggest accomplishments are achieved through teamwork. Only through working together, trusting our abilities to see the common goal, will we save the earth and thus ourselves. Indigenous people want to achieve autonomy and sovereignty through ceremonies and cultural practices. And when we do this work, the changes are made, and we stop industries and corporations from taking over. And I've witnessed that through the Utsam Witness program. I've witnessed what happened down in North Dakota. I've witnessed it in different places, and it's a term that I've come up with is ceremonial activism. And so by actively practicing our ceremonies and our culture, like these young people in the canoe in the picture, these are young people taking back their rights to be on the land and working and learning and pulling together. And they understand that their work is essential, that everything they do, from carving that canoe to the paddles, to learning how to paddle, learning how to swim, learning how to save each other if there's an accident on the water, all those things, they have to prepare themselves for everything. And then to live on the land. And then that picture, that is us going off into House Sound to an island where there's no electricity, and we had to build our own camp setup, and we brought everything back that we brought with us. We left no traces other than footprints. And we owe the next several generations on Earth to live healthy lives on, and that's my view about that. So thank you for your time. That's my oops, I didn't do it right. What am I doing? Okay, so I hope that was good, but that's what I want to share, and I pass off the baton to the next speaker. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Cease. I'm always so inspired by the work you're doing, and it keeps me going with some of the stuff I've been trying to do as well. Thank you for your dedication. Our next panelist is Jen Sungshine. Jen is a queer Taiwanese Canadian, interdisciplinary and multi-hyphenated artist and community facilitator and cultural producer based in Vancouver, BC. She is the co-artistic director and co-founder of Love Intersections, a media arts collective producing intergenerational and intersectional QT BIPOC stories through documentary film. Her most recent works include Yellow Peril, Queer Destiny, which was in 2019, followed with, that was the winner of the Jerry Brunette Memorial Award for Best BC Short. And then came her visual art exhibit, Yellow Peril, Celestial Elements, which was in 2020 at the Sum Gallery down in Chinatown. She is co-producer of Current, Feminist Electronic Art Symposium, and currently serves on the board of Vancouver Artists Labor Union Cooperative. Here is insight into her life as environment. Please welcome Jen Sungshine.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share screen. Okay. Good afternoon. I just want to say before I begin that it is truly an honor to present alongside Cease and Rita, who I respect tremendously and admire with deep fondness. So a little bit about myself. I was born in Taiwan, and I'm a first generation Taiwanese Canadian settler. But I have always found Vancouver to be a lonely city. Its passive aggressive hostility and astronomical cost of living and continuous displacement often make spontaneous and organic community experiences inaccessible, pandemic notwithstanding. I live alone in a small one-bedroom without any close friends in proximity. What I do have are my houseplants and a deaf 17-year-old cat named Lucy, who sadly passed away last month, but still remains a kind of presence in my home. The isolation of the pandemic changed everything. When I wake up every morning and ask my plants, are you thriving or are you surviving? I am by osmosis asking myself that very same question. My plants teach me to spend a lot of time taking care of them because they take care of me too in our shared isolation. Paying attention to the phenomenon of tropism that occurs when plants reach for their needs, and listening to the many voices of my plants who are unable to speak, but are in fact expressing and conveying so loudly, has allowed me to transfer these insights into my artistic practice in the external world. Plants and animals taught me a language of relationship and an ethos of care. In 2013, I co-founded Love Intersections, a media arts collective that produced documentary films that center the stories of queer, trans, and non-binary BIPOCs. I'm largely moved to cultivating and building a world where we can develop elastic relationships with one another by building social trust through collaboration and through the practice of translation. In other words, translating ideas and ourselves across a broad demographic of people working within different cultural communities, ontologies, industries, disciplines, realities, and experiences. And I do that act of translation through film and storytelling. I learned that advocacy addressing systemic issues involves a three-pronged approach: personalize, inform, and let loose. When I personalize, I'm gathering stories to allow people outside of the community to personally identify with people from inside the community. And it also allows people, it also allows community members from within the community to identify with each other through shared experiences. For me, a good story helps us make choices in our own lives. It helps us relate to one another and draw out our empathy. When I inform, I connect those personal stories to systemic statistics about how this affects the community at large. And finally, when I let loose, I inspire action items that people can act upon to further my advocacy and goals. In 2019, I co-produced Current Feminist Electronic Art Symposium and its mentorship program for and by women, non-binary artists, and artists of color, mentoring skills necessary for artists to continue making culture and preparing them in the areas of grant writing, networking, curatorial vision development, community building, placemaking, project planning, budgeting, and multi-day event programming. We learn how to do taxes. And perhaps just as important as taxes, we also learn how to collaborate. We learn how to collaborate with people who are wonderfully weird and different from you, and by extension, problem solving together, whether that's through conflict resolution or negotiating different approaches to activism. I think that when intersectional voices come together, I often find surprises and joy and tension, conflict, creative differences, and most of all, a diversity of tactics and approaches to social change. Although just because you throw a diverse bunch of people together in a room doesn't mean everyone is going to show up and organize the same way. For me, the process is about how we build and maintain relationships over time and how to evolve and adapt ourselves to one another through the art of collaboration. I'm currently a worker owner at Value Co-op, the Vancouver Artists Labor Union Cooperative, and we help transform labor practices within the arts and cultural sector by empowering weirdo artists and culture workers through ethical art making and event production in our Chinatown studio. I think what I care about the most in what I do at its core is about creating and optimizing spaces for people to be recognized, accepted, loved, and most importantly, to forge collaborative relationships where we can bring our wonderfully weird and wonderfully queer arty selves to the table. We fight a lot at Value Co-op, sometimes productive, sometimes not, because we are not single issue people who lead single issue lives. If an intersection is a place where accidents happen, and when people meet at that intersection is also where we see different forms, approaches, strategies, movements, genders and sexualities, and punks and goths and weirdos and strangers all trying to work together, then I find beauty in that. So you can see that all of these threads come together for me: relationality, responsibility, queerness, weirdness, art, and story has only deepened my responsibilities as an artist. In today's political climate, I think very deeply about how I do relationships and imagine myself in relation to the human and the non-human, to the sound, to the place, object, and living matter around me. When we are in relationship, not just with the human, but with the non-human, we're building our communities and nourishing more thoughtful kinship to grow, for young people and elders and weirdos to find a sense of safety and belonging, and for us to see our stories reflected back to us. And here I am reminded that the air that we share also becomes the breath that we need to talk to each other, to understand one another. It is the very oxygen that is needed for a thriving microcosm, surviving a world full of chaos. So let's eat, let's dream, let's bring our wonderfully weird and wonderfully queer selves to the table just as we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jen. It's so inspiring, and collaboration happens to be one of the things that I really try to focus on, understanding that nothing can be done if it's just done as one individual. It takes so much more time. It's so much more powerful and inspiring when you work in a group and you are working in collaboration with people of different perspectives and views. It really helps to broaden the possibilities of change. Thank you very much. Our next and last panelist is Rita Wong, and probably lots of people know her through her poetry and her activism. Rita Wong lives and works on the unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, also known as Vancouver, dedicated to questions of water, justice, decolonization, and ecology. She is the author of Monkey Puzzle, Forage, Civil Unrest with Larissa Lai, Undercurrent, Perpetual with Cindy Mochizuki, and Beholden with Fred Waugh, as well as the co-editor of Downstream, Reimagining Water with Dorothy Christian. If you want to see what she's doing now and what she's working on, you can go to 1308trees.ca. And I continue to be inspired by how Rita's dedication is integrated on all levels of her work as poet, activist, and educator. Please give a really warm welcome to Rita. Rita?
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Haruko. I'm going to try to share screen now. And hopefully this will work. First of all, I'd like to thank Cease and Jen for their beautiful presentations. It's such an honor to be on this panel with you all. I love their work. I also want to acknowledge, as somebody who lives on unceded Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish land, the leadership of the Coast Salish peoples in protecting the land and stewarding it for so many generations. For the last 3 or so years, I've been up supporting the community of people that are up at the watch house, Kwakwaknuktuk, on the east gate of the Burnaby tank farm for the Trans Mountain Pipeline. That little yellow post in the front there means that there's a pipeline right underground. And there are hundreds of people who've been arrested and many more than that who have not been arrested, working really hard to stop the pipeline from being expanded because we can't afford to be increasing fossil fuel infrastructure right now. And one of the beautiful allies in this work is the Little Hummingbird. Some of you may have heard that the tree cutting in Burnaby along the Brunette River was recently stopped until August because of the nesting hummingbirds. And that work happened because of a community of people paying attention, spending time in the woods. And when we're thinking about climate change and crisis, it can be very intimidating. But the way we work with it, I think, is we stay grounded, we pay attention to the places we love, and we spend time with them. And it was a bunch of people paying attention to the birds, listening to the trees, following the water, that basically alerted the Federal Ministry of Environment that this was going on and these trees were housing these birds. And so they've been temporarily stopped for the moment, but there's still a lot of work to do in terms of how to stop this pipeline. I want to invite folks to visit the tree sit. You'll see on the right there, that's the tree house that's been there for about 160 days or 150 days of folks in the tree, blocking pipelines from cutting those trees down, right alongside the Hummingbird Warriors. Every Saturday at noon, they have tours and folks are invited to go check it out. It's in Burnaby. I'll put the website in the chat if somebody else could do that. And I really love the Coast Salish lands that we're on, and it's a true privilege to be here. I should have introduced myself that I was born on Treaty 7 territories, also known as Calgary, but I've been living here on unceded Coast Salish lands for the last couple of decades. And yeah, the trees, I love the trees, and we're able to hug a tree during the pandemic when we can't hug each other. And I think that it's been a time to really reconsider how we connect to the land that we're on. But today I'm going to spend my next 3 minutes or so telling you a little bit about another thing. So we're down in Vancouver, and I'm happy to answer questions about the pipeline. But up north, where Fort St. John is, there's also the building of the Site C Dam. And a few years ago, about 5 or 6 years ago, I was invited up to Treaty 8 territory for a decolonizing water gathering. And so I went up there, and unbeknownst to me, BC Hydro started cutting down trees that housed eagles' nests. And this is a river gathering. That's the Peace River in the background, and folks drumming and singing in a ceremony for the river. And so I accidentally fortuitously became part of that ceremony. And every summer since then, I've renewed my relationship to return there, because even in talking to you over the computer and turning on the electric lights in my home, I'm connected to the Peace Valley and the Peace River through that electrical grid that you saw in that map. And I think it's really important for those of us who are not able to get up north to learn about what's going on up there, because we're connected through these systems. And the Peace Valley is able to grow enough produce to feed 1 million people. Is one of the best agricultural spots in BC, so-called BC, but it is in serious danger because of the Site C Dam, which would flood all this valley. I'm up there with my friend Yvonne Tupper from the Soto First Nation, and Valley and Jules, who's a poet. We're up there for the Paddle for the Peace in this picture. And to travel up there and spend time has been a real gift. So I'd like to share a little bit of that. What I've been doing is learning from the water, learning from the rivers, paying attention to the local creeks and the watersheds, including the Salish Sea. And up here, I'm with a group of artists and students who are visiting the Twin Sisters Native Nursery, Native Plant Nursery. It's a project between the West Moberly and Soto First Nations, and they grow plants to remediate the land, thinking about what Cease was talking, to actually heal the land. So there's amazing work happening up there that people should be aware of. With the before and the after with apologies is pretty heartbreaking. And I share these images not to distress or shock people, but to not look away from the violence, and also to remind ourselves that we need to heal the destruction that has happened in the past, but we also need to heal the destruction that's happening right now. Those eagle's nests that I mentioned have continued to come down. This photo was taken in October 2020. That eagle's nest in that picture is about 1,000 pounds big, and it is bigger than all those BC Hydro guys trying to take it down and move it. And so it can be pretty heartbreaking to see this, that this is a brush pile of many trees that have been cut down, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of these kinds of piles up and down the Peace Valley. To have to clear cut this huge area of land, like the distance of Vancouver to Whistler, in order to create this dam is just horrendous and is not a climate solution. That's me in front of one of those brush piles, just to give you a sense of the scale. And, you know, this is just my personal story of traveling up and down and witnessing and not looking away, and standing with the West Moberly First Nations, who are opposed to the dam and are in court. So they're fundraising, and they've been quite successful in the fundraising to stop the dam. They'll be going to court in the next couple of years. And I think that anybody who cares about food security in BC, about Indigenous solidarity, this is something to absolutely pay attention to and stand with. You know, it's pretty upsetting to me to see the scale of the destruction happening up there. But at the same time, there's a lot of that the land teaches us. The land is healing itself and will heal itself if we leave it alone and give it time and work with it too. Like Cease says, it takes a long time to heal, but it can happen, but we need to stop the destruction so that we can heal the land. I am not sure if I've run out of time, so I'm going to stop there. But I wanted to close just by saying and reiterating how important it is to work together, to stand with Tsleil-Waututh, with Squamish, with West Moberly. And it can be tiring in terms of the grief that one feels at this destruction, but the way to deal with the grief is to act together, to remain related in relationship and care, like Jen was talking about, and to keep building kinship and to be good relatives with our Indigenous relatives. So thank you everybody for listening.
Thank you, Rita. I'm always inspired by how well you've integrated everything that you are committed to into the full spectrum of your life and your work as an artist. I really, really am inspired by that. I'd like to thank all three panelists, powerhouse people. I consider you all powerhouse people. And hopefully there have been ears that have taken this into their hearts, and that they will find a way of making steps towards resolution. Right now, I'd like to put forward a question to our panelists. And this is something that I've been thinking of for quite a while. There is now a wide recognition of growing complexity and dynamism in the world. It's evident across high science, popular media, and the experience of daily life. But there is still a relational gap between our understanding of human connection to the underlying root causes of these issues. How do we begin to fully understand without numbing ourselves to the impact of our complicity? How do we do this? Where do we start? Because a lot of people feel overwhelmed and then they get distracted and they don't know where to start. So anyone can jump in from the panel and give a response.
I could briefly maybe say this is something that I face a lot with folks. And I like to say, start with what you love doing. Start with what gives you energy. You're no good to everybody else if you're exhausted and burnt out and all of that, right? And I think we're all born on this earth with different gifts to share. So find out, spend time cultivating your own gift and share it. Find ways to connect. That's the first place I would start.
I really resonate with that, and to add to that, I think humor and a sense of like levity is also something I like connecting with people around, that when we're dealing with such serious subject matter, that there are moments of lightness and humor that we can, laugh over, shared food and breaking bread and like these kind of ceremony of gathering. So I want to always bring humor back into a space.
It's very healing. Humor is always very healing.
It's the most free medicine, humor.
Yes.
It's the most free medicine. And I think, like I really feel like the ecological grief that people are going through is coming out in so many ways. And as we can see from our presentation here, our panel, it can be on the land, it could be on the water, it could be in your home, it could be in places you've never been. It's out there. And and I really can't say enough about how we need to all work together. That's, as we all know, it's a small handful of extremely privileged, Eurocentric and anthropocentric views. Like it's a very human view of the world, that we can do whatever we want to it and everything will be fine. And what we know is that that's not true, that it's devastating to look at, even one eagle's nest being moved like that and how magnificent it is. And yet these hydro men, these BC hydro workers think they can take it down and move it somewhere else. It's like, why don't you just leave the trees there? And why don't you just go somewhere else? Like, where, why don't you go to your backyard and tear it down and lose everything? They're still going home to a nice home. They're going home to their affluence, but it's a very single-minded view to just take down homes of these creatures that are, again, for Indigenous people, we humans are the children of all creation. Our parents are everything around us in nature. They're animals, they're birds, they're the four-leggeds, the winged ones, the ones with scales, the ones that crawl. They're the rocks, they're the plants. And, also as Rita so lovingly said, like we're all in isolation from one another, but the trees are there. The ones, you don't have to go to a clear cut and hug the tree farmed trees on the edge of a clear cut. You can go down the street and hug the trees on your street. And I live near Stanley Park, so people see me hugging the trees there all the time, and they're like, okay. It's like, yeah, I'm here hugging this tree. Yep, that's me. And I am proud of it. And, you know, I actually, when I bring kids in the forest or even in the parks, that's what I get them to do. I get them to all hug trees so they learn now. And it's not just Indigenous people I'm bringing into these places. I'm bringing people from the whole medicine wheel into these spaces and encouraging them to have a relationship with the natural world. And it is the biggest problem. The people that are feeling the biggest level of ecological grief are the ones that have very deep personal connections to the natural world. We're grieving for everybody, for the forests, for the waters, for the lands. You know, when we're talking about the fact that a killer whale is holding her dead baby on her nose for 2 weeks, and if anybody didn't feel grief from that, and I couldn't believe questions, why would she do that? Why? Because she's calling the human race out. By the way, these are intelligent beings and they know who caused it. They know why there's no food for their children. They know that the Chinook salmon are almost gone. And when the Chinook salmon are gone, all the southern resident killer whales will be gone. And I've been yelled at by Eurocentric men that think I'm an idiot, like they can eat a seal. No, they can't actually, because just because they're a killer whale doesn't mean that's what they eat. Like they all have specific diets. It's like saying that me as an Indigenous person is the same as somebody, you know, from the Siksika Nation or the Dene Nations. Like we all have our foods that make us who we are. And it is the same in the natural world. So, you know, we all literally have to link arms, as the Dana said. They said we all have to link arms to stop the madness. We have to throw away our issues with one another. We need to respect that we all have a common goal, and that's saving T'uy't'tanat-Cease. She is our mother. She is all of our mothers. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Can I just add something about complicity, Haruko? That was also in your question.
Yes.
And just quickly, you know, I can't change what has happened before me. It's done, but I can change how I respond to that history. And I think it's really important for people to acknowledge that and set some boundaries around that, because it can be immobilizing, that sense of guilt or whatever. And I say, you know, we have to get over that and get to work. The other thing is that, you know, with complicity, if you're trying to stop a pipeline, like the, you know, pipeline people will be like, well, don't you drive a car or don't you use oil or blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, well, yeah, but there's a systems change that we're talking about, right? That we're working towards. And yes, individual change is important and we can work on it individually, but we need a collective approach and we need a system change. So, you know, not getting too caught up in the little one-off things, but thinking about the bigger picture, I think can actually help us get on the same page.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Because I think it is very challenging for people to think and stretch out from just, it's about me, that is attack on me. It's, I feel bad, but I can't do anything. It's when you can pull it out to a much broader parameter and see that there are other people in there who are working to try and take the first step forward or find a way in which they can regain that generative perspective and way of doing it. It is going to take time, and the system that we're in knows that it needs to speed up. And so what we're seeing in accelerated action, there is more plastic out there right now, despite the fact that people think that recycling is a good thing. It's actually run by industry. And so a lot of what is put in bins doesn't get recycled because it's too expensive. It's not profitable. So when we start shipping that off to other countries, that's where that's what you don't hear about in the popular media. You don't hear the full thread of what that leads to. So we're left with the sugar sweet part and not dealing with the actual reality of what is happening. So this is just taking the time, taking back our space and time that is every living being's right to have. And the system we live is really pulling it apart and distracting us so that we live by a calendar, a day planner, and there's not much time to really go deep in reflection. So I always encourage people, take back your time, and they're going, I can't make more time. And I'm going, no, this is your time. This is the time that belongs to you. Take it back. And so you can do it in little bits and pieces around your house, taking 5-10 minutes just to lie back and breathe deep is the beginning of taking back your time and space. It can be that simple as a starting point. And hopefully people do that. So thank you very much for your responses to the question. I know it's a difficult one, and it's not one that has a simple solution. It's very, very complex. But now I think I will turn it over to our tech team to get the participants into breakout rooms for discussions and conversations and shared ideas.
We
And
actually have until 2:05, so another 15 minutes.
Okay.
Anyone would like to pose any questions, this would be the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for Rita and Cease. I'm just curious, what have you observed in different generations and how they organize and how they organize differently? Do you have any insights or observations along the way?
Wow, that's a great question. And it takes a little while to think about it.
Yeah, I feel like that's a really big question too, because I mean, I look at the way people do it now. It's actually a lot easier than it used to be. You can basically use social media or these secured lines like WhatsApp or Signal to really connect, which we haven't been able to do in the past. And when we look at activism that has gone wrong because of lack of communication, it's not something so prevalent now. It's like, and I honestly see an evolution in the revolution in that way through the tech tools that we have and how they're used and how they're how we strategize together, and that we can, even in a pandemic, we can organize to meet with no devices on us to be recorded, and that we can have these conversations in quicker ways. It's a lot easier now to organize and mobilize. And I think looking at the Idle No More movement, that right there kind of summarizes it. And it tells us how, a movement that sprang out of, I'm putting on my hat and going away because somebody's mowing over here and it's really loud. But how we've really taken that work and use the technology to go viral around the world. It didn't just spread across a city or across a country. It really reached a global issue, and that's to me, that's the power of how the revolution has an evolution unto itself with social media and with tech tools and with being able to get out and meet and actively address these issues together. So it's not something in my 20s that was a possibility. It's taken like into this point, you know, you go 30 years later and now we're actually finally getting it right. And here we are, the smartest creatures on the planet, supposedly, but we're still doing stupid things. And, you know, and like the water creatures, the land creatures are all telling us that we are still getting it wrong. So at the end of the day, we really need to, you know, we still need people to chain themselves to gates and to trees and to build these tree houses. We need people on the ground photographing the nests that fall down and to draw attention and to form groups that are walking the land and observing, because it isn't something one person can do. If we've learned anything at all, it's that we all still need to talk more. And we all still need to get over ourselves. Like humans are, you know, even the coolest people, we still all have egos and we still have to find our humility. We still have to address those issues, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
yeah, I just wanted to add, you know, it feels like things have sped up in terms of our tools, but it also feels like there's principles that are still important. So when I look at previous generations, I think about like the relations between people like Sky Lee, a Chinese Canadian author who wrote Disappearing Moon Cafe, and Lee Miracle and Jim Wong Chu and folks like that, Lily Shinde, Sid Tan. Like there's a whole generation of folks before. And one of the things that I learned from Lee a long time ago, when I was still living in Calgary, Lee came and visited the Women of Color Collective in the 90s and did a workshop with us, and basically kind of reminded us very gently but firmly that, you know, you can work on anti-racism, you can work on feminism and all that, but you're not going to get anywhere unless you deal with colonization. Like you have to get at the root and this, you know, the cause of the system, not just the symptoms of that system or the tools of that system. And I think that's a lesson that goes back many generations, obviously, but it continues to be relevant today. So like I feel like those principles are important to kind of pass on, and then the tools with which we respond or enact those principles change all the time.
Yeah, I think some of the things that I'm seeing with the younger generation is, I remember when the city was planning on rezoning Chinatown and was going to build all these high rises and condos, and they misjudged that the young people were connected with the elders there. And the movement was so quick in response to that, that the whole thing got shut down. And that told me that modern technology, when it is used in a way, its speed actually is effective in addressing issues that are coming up for people who might not be able to use the internet. It was a team of young people working with the elders and who lived in and needed Chinatown to be where they could walk and buy their own foods and medicines. It was with the young people activating online and communicating through their social media networks that actually brought the whole thing out to a much broader understanding and awareness in the city. I've also witnessed, working with Just Towards a Decolonial Future Collective, that we managed to get enough cell phones to Indigenous people in the Amazon forest and the areas that were under attack by the Brazilian government, that the Brazilian government actually stopped what they were planning on doing and backed off. So small things, using social media, using online, getting things to where things are needed can happen much faster than when I was in my 20s. And so I'm quite inspired by what young people can do today. Yes, there is confusion. There is overwhelming. There is this whole thing around how am I going to live in a city that's this expensive and still do the work that I need to do. But it's the fact that they form into collectives and bubbles of support that I'm actually seeing their resilience and their ability to work with social media in a way that I still have to have them teach me how to work a cell phone.
One thing I love about what you do, Jen, is that emphasis on relationship building and eating together and spending time together in a deep way. Social media doesn't substitute for that, right? That's really important to hold on that relationality. I co-edited an anthology with Joanne Lee many years ago called Activating Geographies, and she talked about how with SPOTA, the Strathcona Property Owners and Tenants Association, they stopped the destruction of Chinatown by knocking on doors, networking, talking to people door by door, and working to build coalitions with a broad range of people to basically achieve their goals. So there's a lot of principles in how previous generations have organized that remain really valid and relevant today. I think there's a couple of questions in the chat.
Let's see.
Azul says, oftentimes I feel trapped in echo chambers. I feel like we preach to the choir. My question is, from your experience, how do we hold difficult conversations with people we love, but who are in deep denial? Good question. Hard question. I think there are gifts that different people have, and maybe that's not for everybody, but I think that somebody needs to do that work of having those hard conversations. Sometimes I think it's a question of trying to find the right time to have that conversation. And sometimes I think it's trying to find common ground somewhere. What folks are saying earlier about a sense of humor, we don't all have to think about this, think the same way, but that we can still talk to each other even when we disagree.
Here's another question. Would a decolonizing approach provide a common umbrella for the many grassroots groups battling injustice, enable them to form broader coalitions and alliances? That's from Norm Leach.
Yeah, that's a difficult question to answer, Norm. I would say, in theory, and there's I have a hopefulness with that, but I think I would feel it to be a little naive to think that this would create the necessary common umbrella for grassroots organizations, because they're operating under such a mass, like a divide and conquer kind of situation. I don't know if I'm articulating this very well. I would like it to be, but I don't know how practical it would be in practice. Like, because there are organizations that, as grassroots as they are not even able to, if they have an all-white organization, grassroots organization, for example, there's still so much more work there that needs to be done before we even get to that conversation of decolonizing.
Yeah, we really all individually need to work every day on our own personal level of decolonization, and then bring that into the work we do in allyship with others. And yeah, hey, I'm just really concerned that my battery isn't going to last. Like, I don't know how, I was not clear how long today's session was, and I ran out the door without bringing a plug for my phone, so a charger, and so this is a really draining thing for a phone. So I don't know how long I'm gonna be able to stay on and still have enough power that if I needed to send texts to my daughter, because I have my niece with me today, and so I might have to leave. I might have to leave early. I just didn't, with the extra half hour, it's really draining. So I don't know how long I'll be here. So I just want to give that heads up. If I leave, it's not for any personal reason, like against anybody. It's just that I'm working with technology. I charged my phone as much as I could before I left, and then realized I didn't bring a charger with me to put in afterwards. So yeah,
Thank you,
Cece,
Steve.
sorry.
thank you so much for joining us. We're actually going to move into the breakout groups. So your battery length was actually, oh, am I on mute?
No, you're good.
Oh. So I'm going to just interrupt here and say, we will, if we're going to lose these, thank you so much for your words today, your wisdom. As we shift into the breakout groups, people have time to take a bio break, and then we'll be coming back. We may not see Cease when we come back, but hopefully Jen and Rita will be with us when we offer our generative questions.
Yeah. And I want to thank you all. It's been a real honor to be in this conversation with all of these incredible people here. I have really unique friendships and allyships with everyone on this panel, and you all really mean a lot to me. And one of the things about doing these webinars is being able to see people and see what you've been doing during this pandemic. And I'm really glad that you're all here, and that, you know, that you're doing all the things you're doing and feeling the really real feels that you are, because, you know, even Rita and I tried to get together to help. I wanted to help with the activism with the hummingbirds, and then I had gotten my COVID shot, and it knocked me out literally for 3 or 4 days. And then the following week, I ended up getting an actual cold from working in the rain and wind. So I was down for another 3 weeks because I had to my body had to, I haven't had a cold in 2 years. So it was like, boom, so I had to rebuild my immune system, which was good. But yeah, and it's like, those are the things where it's like, I want to get there, but instead I just prayed over all those materials. And when the hummingbirds stopped that deconstruction of the forest, it was really uplifting. And I've really shared that story with a lot of people, that I think it literally is shifting their ecological grief and giving them hope to think about, how really the birds and bees are at risk, but they're helping us stop this destruction. So I do want to, if I don't get to say anything else, I do want to say that it really is the little creatures of this earth that they're not going to take over. They obviously aren't. Humans are the ones doing that, but they're the ones that are giving us hope. And each and every one of us just needs to support those little beings and thank them every day that we eat berries and that we have a beautiful world at all to live in. So thank you.
Thanks, Cease.
Thank you, Cease.
Hi, everyone. I guess I'm spotlighted again, so I'll go first. I apologize in advance to my group because we sort of had it, and then we just went right back to the group. So hopefully this is the one that we decide on. But our generative question is, in what ways can we ensure our allyship to Mother Earth is inclusive of a non-human centric perspective?
Hey everyone, thank you to my group for the robust discussion. The question that I believe we have settled on is, how do we ensure that we are giving to the land as much as we are receiving from the land?
Okay. Okay, so group 3, we are, thanks to group 3 for the wonderful session. I'm actually going to give 2 questions, but our question is, how do we weave nature into our lives and ourselves into nature in a way that allows us to live and breathe and keep that balance? And then our second question, which I think is maybe Ayumi can explain later, is wonderful, is how can we all become performance artists every day at every moment?
Oh, okay. Thank you to my group as well. We had a lovely time and we came up with, we're going to slip in 2 questions also. What can I do in my garden that will build allyships with marginalized people, and who would like to work in our community garden?
Hi, everyone. Thanks to my group and thank you to Sammy as well for co-facilitating with me. So our question is, how do we build or strengthen community economies so that they work to heal our relations with the land and water? Or a second part, how do we get economies to work for us rather than us working for the economy?
Okay, and so in my group, Norm, Naomi, Marion, Vivian, and I came up with 2 questions. How might colonized systems develop solutions to the problems they have caused? And what is the role of dreaming, hope, optimism, faith among people, all beings, and the land?
Wow. Lots of good generative questions. Well, that will lead into the next Paueru Gai dialogue for sure. There seems a need to actually have more in-depth discussion around these things, us and nature, nature and us. And so hopefully we actually get a chance to talk longer and go into some informal discussions after this end of the formal part of this event. I want to thank everybody who took the time to join in and participate and listen in, and maybe have changed a different perspective or had something come up in your mind that you never thought about before. That's the purpose of such a time, to be able to sit and talk with one another and push ideas and questions ahead to see where we are, where we might go, how we might deal with the things that we're dealing with. So I'd like to thank you all, and especially thank the panelists who kickstarted this dialogue off with what their experience has been. And I welcome you all to take the time afterwards in the informal discussion space that's left, if you care to continue talking about the things that came up in your group discussions.
Thank you so much, Haruko. We'll see you all hopefully June 26th at the next one. Reconsidering land, history, and belonging.